Hello indie game fans, welcome back to I Dream of Indie. This is Ole Gamer Joe here with another review. Today, we're looking at Micetopia on the PlayStation 4, also playable on the PlayStation 5. It's priced at $4.99 and it comes from Ratalaika Games. It's also available on the Xbox and the Nintendo Switch. Currently, those platforms are offering a $1 discount at the time of this review. That will bring your price down to $3.99 here in North America. Micetopia is described as, quote, a mouse-sized medieval Metroidvania adventure. That's pretty accurate to what this game is all about. Micetopia will put you in control of a heroic mouse who is out to save the villagers that have been captured by evil forces. The only one that remains is an elder who explains the situation to you, and so you'll go through a variety of different caves and forests. Well, not really much of a variety, but there are a few different settings in this short adventure, trying to save all of the villagers and bring them back home. In order to be successful in your journey, you're going to need to rely on some very basic platforming and combat skills. You do have a short sword in this title, and you'll use that to slash away at enemies. Unfortunately, for me anyways, this is one of those games where the circle button acts as you're attacking, and that always throws my brain for a bit of a loop as I'm so used to square being the attack button. Regardless though, you do pick up a few other skills as you go, including a roll, and you can also use a bow and arrow. As you explore these rather simplistic labyrinths, which are of a decent size, you'll have a map that you can access. It's a very basic block-based map without a lot of detail put into it whatsoever. It's easy enough to read, though to be honest with you, there were a few times in the game where I wasn't quite sure a certain entrance was available, and in fact it was. So I did do a little bit of backtracking, but overall this is very basic. You don't get lost too often in the experience, and it's mostly easy to navigate your way around. As you explore, you won't come across a huge variety of different enemies. There are a few types, however, and a lot of them are really obnoxious and not necessarily smart in any real way in terms of AI, but designed in a way to trip you up on a jump or to block your path. Pretty annoying, not really difficult per se, just placed obnoxiously. It doesn't really end up being a huge deal though, as death doesn't mean much. You will eventually come across portals that will either bring you back to the main village hub or to secret areas where you can collect stones. These stones are used to try and rebuild a fountain back in your village. Overall, in terms of gameplay, if you're a fan of this genre, this is the very bare bones essence of that genre, so don't expect any real deep exploration here, don't expect a ton of enemy variety, and don't expect a ton of treasure. You collect little green stones that can eventually be used for an upgrade, but that's really about all there is to it. There's not a ton of bosses in the game either, and the ones that are here are pretty dumb if I'm being real with you. They're very easy to take care of, and don't offer much of a challenge either. But to be fair, I think that's the game that these developers have set out to make. It's a very simplistic style game, it's not going to last long, and you're not going to really think about it much after you've completed it. And if you're okay with that, well, the price is right, I suppose. Graphically though, Micetopia isn't that bad of a game to look at. I love pixel art, and there's plenty of it on display here. I could have done with some more varieties in settings. Obviously, you really just have the cave and the forest here and not much else, so it gets a little bit old. And again, there's only a handful of enemy designs to look at. The patterns of the backgrounds get repetitive, a lot of reused assets here, but it is still somewhat charming and cute just based on the fact that it has some pretty decent pixel art. Much like everything else in Micetopia, you're going to find that the soundtrack is pretty bite-sized as well. There's only a handful of tracks, but they're pretty decent, very retro as you might expect, go along fairly well with the aesthetic and the settings, but I did find that they wore out their welcome on me, especially the cave theme that played over and over again, as that's where I spent the majority of my games. So, on the whole, a decent soundtrack for retro enthusiasts, but a bit repetitive. The sound effects, on the other hand, are pretty much unremarkable, nothing that you wouldn't expect, and nothing too surprising or interesting. So, decent sound design and a solid aesthetic here, but the key takeaway for me was that it's all a little bit repetitive. I guess that's to be expected in a short game. Overall, Micetopia is a classic example of you get what you pay for. It's a short experience, the combat is not exceptional and can be a little bit obnoxious, the exploration is not very deep here, there's no real equipment to get, there's no deep systems integrated into this title whatsoever. You get a few basic abilities, you're going to spend a couple hours playing, and that's about it for Micetopia. You're never going to think about it again, but for the price, you get decent value here. It will give you a fun weekend. So will you be be exploring the world of Micetopia? Let us know in the comments section below, and if you have enjoyed our video coverage today, consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps us to bring a voice to the voiceless ones in gaming. There's a ton of other ways to support I Dream of Indie right down in the description box below. We have a merchandise page, and we also offer memberships here on the channel with a ton of cool perks. However you end up supporting I Dream of Indie, it helps us continue bringing you more and more reviews, and we thank you so much for doing so.